Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Diversion of the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. And as always, hit that subscribe button, everybody. We have an amazing show for you all because aboard the mothership is Tony Amendola. You know him as Master Braytac on Stargate SG-1. He now appears in Blackbird as Vincent Gigante and William Shakespeare in Rough Magic Exit Shakespeare. Come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Amendola. It's a great honor to speak with you, sir. I'm a big fan, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Like you said, it's totally my pleasure, sir. I've been a fan of yours going all the way back to Stargate.
Wow. You don't seem that old.
I actually am 42.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the compliment, though. I'll be running that compliment for at least a little while.
Okay.
So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for acting and who your earliest influences?
Oh, God. I got into acting. The first thing I ever did was in college. And as much as anything else, it was a young man looking for a place to put his passion, putting his energy, and so I sort of fell into literally walked into an audition, and the school I went to for undergraduate was very unbalanced, like four females to each male. So
Nice.
if you could walk and talk, you were there. So you were in the show. And but because of that, I had a lot of opportunity in undergraduate school that started out very much social. It was never serious, and only later did it become more serious. And then I continued the viability of it. Generally you're blind to it for a while. What I mean is, if you really considered the likelihood of a career as an actor, it would give you great pause. But I was too stupid to realize that. And youth can't be told those things. The one thing I did do is I went on to get a master's as a degree, which means you can teach. It's called an MFA. It's called the terminal degree. So and the rest is history. I did teach when I was fresh out of university to earn enough money to move to New York, which all good East Coast actors do. And I was there 3 months when I got hired to go to Ashland, and then worked regionally for 15 years solid, 15 years. I mean, in a company, 6-8 plays a year, really, foundational. Every type of play, every type of roles you weren't right for. So really challenging, and basically a formulative sort of experience for me.
So I think what's a great thing about you, once again, not only are you just a phenomenal actor, but you are noted whether or not you're a hero or a villain, whether or not you're Braytac, or as we'll read, talk later about Vincent Gigante from Blackbird. You're known for your presence on screen. You just had this strong presence of like wisdom and strength and power. How do you develop presence? Is it just something that is there? Is it teachable?
I don't really know the answer to that. On some level, it's about having an idea of what you're there for. In other words, one of the most common exercises, when I teach sometimes, is you put 6 people in front of a class and let them look at them. And invariably, most of them, start doing funny things and laughing and it's very uncomfortable. And you put the same 6 people up there and you give them something to do, to move a chair, to count people. And all of a sudden, they're completely normal. They're completely alive. So it's answering those questions, I guess. I appreciate the compliment, but I don't really have an answer. It's not like, if I had an answer, I'd create the pill, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, like I said, one of the characters you're best known for is obviously Master Braytac on Stargate SG-1, which is where I think I first saw you, because once again, fantastic show. So why do you think the character Braytac resonates so well with fans, and has survived 30-something years of TV and still is well remembered?
Yeah, that's a great question. I attribute it probably as much to the writing and my connection with the other actors, both Chris, which is a no-brainer, Chris Judge, who played Tilk, because there had to be a simpatico, there had to be a connection, and I felt it immediately. But also, as important, or a little bit less important to say, is the adversarial relationship with Richard Dean Anderson, which gave it a double thing, because, you know, no one ever said it was going to be a recurring character. It was just, the chemistry was good, and you know, they realized when they put Richard and myself in the same room, oh my God, we can milk this forever, you know, and we did, you know, we had a great time. And I think it's that, and also the show itself. It was a different kind of sci-fi. It wasn't a futuristic sci-fi. It was contemporary. Great writing, Brad Wright, great directing, Robert Cooper, Peter DeLuise, you know, all just terrific people. All the other writers too, you know, Damien and stuff. They were really, really great people. But oddly, it's one of those things, you know, sometimes you want to be on a show, you go in, you talk, you pitch ideas, you do this. I never did any of that. I never did. And they kept writing. I felt good. You know, initially, I did one the first season, one the second season, then it became two, and then it became three. And I thought, oh, this, and what a gift to an actor to have 2 or 3 episodes of a series, not guaranteed, because I never had a guaranteed contract, but, you know, are in the pipeline. You know, to take the edge off when you're doing everything else, you know, down here, which is a little bit more freelance.
Now, the one thing that, because of Stargate and the fans are so dedicated, and the fans of yours are so dedicated, how does it feel to know that you have this strong fan base that will follow you to any film you choose, any TV show you choose, and will tune in to watch it? Does it make decision making easier to take? Does it allow risk taking more?
You know, it depends on your attitude as an actor. You can be very protective of image if you're an actor. You know, you just don't want to do anything that violates that. Me, I like the variety. I honestly do. I like going from film, television, to the theater. Hey, guess what? I'm going to do some mocap on a video game. Oh, I'm going to do this. And guess what? You know, this. I will say that as I've gotten older, with the exception of you know, Blackbird, the characters have gotten gentler, as you know, more wiser and stuff. When I was younger, I played, you know, a lot of drug dealers, a lot of heavies, a lot of different things. And so when I got a chance, older, to play the chin, you know, I felt like, you know, that was about just coming in and, you know, as they say, you probably know this, you know, if you do a Shakespeare play, the king doesn't become the king. It's everyone else who makes the king, and the queen. It's how other people respond to them. And that's true about Blackbird also. Everybody in that yard knew who I was, you know, and so it's an interesting thing. It's in the writing and stuff. So, but I like the variety. So I hope I never disappoint my fans, but I'm certain they'd agree that they don't want to be a straitjacket to me either. You know, I love doing funny stuff. I love doing, you know, as an actor, you have to look in the mirror very carefully when you're starting, and to know how the world sees you and how you see yourself. You know, we all think we're Romeos and Hamlets and all these things, but, you know, so that you can put your foot in the door and start working, so that should you be lucky enough to attain some success and some longevity, you then are allowed, oddly, to grow, to switch, to play bigger things. I just did a movie that was very interesting, because I played a fair amount of priests. It's called Spin the Bottle. It's a horror film that's going to be coming out, but this was a sort of a Pentecostal priest. It's different. You know, I was in Annabelle, I was in La Llorona, a bunch of them, Christmas movie over in Santa Fe, different priests. And this one, it was like, okay, he's a priest, but I wonder, you know, this is a different part of the world. And so it's nice. It's, I don't want to get locked in. Someone described it one time as first person and third person acting. First person acting is when you're simply always yourself. And that is a wonderful thing. If you're Paul Newman, guess what? You don't really need to change.
Right.
If you're Jack Nicholson, you don't really need to change. And in fact, that's what the audience wants. That's what the public wants, is Paul Newman and Jack Nicholson. It's not to say they don't take it very seriously. Of course they do. But then there are third person acting, which has been described as, trying to enter the character a little bit more. It's why certain directors, when they do a film, they like having unknowns in the leads, because the audience has no expectation at all of what he or she is going to do. Generally Stardom is saying, oh, it goes like this. This is what I bring. So they hired me. This is what I bring. Ba-bum. But when you don't know what the ba-bum is, of what this actor or actress is going to do, it can be very exciting.
So when you have a role like Bright Tag, where people have a definite feel towards, once again, he's and something that he's known for, like I said, the wisdom, everything else. When you play a different character, are you able to use those expectations against the fans and be like, all right, you already know I'm going to be viewed like this, so now I can act kind of like this or that?
Yeah, but it's all in the role. I mean, you'd be crazy to change for the sake of change sometimes. Like I was talking about the preacher, it takes place in the Southwest, in a small town where probably Catholics are not the dominant population, so it makes sense. But I have done things. I mean, for instance, in World of Warcraft, there's a guy who I play called Khadgar. It's a wonderful, wonderful role. He and Braytak are cousins. They are related. The needs of the role are similar in a kind of way. Their honor, their wisdom. It would be foolish, not to use some of that, and then trust that the very situation, the writing, the style of the writing, the fact that it's a video game, will create the difference. And also, in a video game that's not mocap, you're not seeing me. You're seeing the other image.
So when you're playing a role like, as you mentioned, Vincent Gigante in Blackbird, which for the fans who don't know, is a real mob boss. He was in history, and a really fascinating mob boss as well, considering I guess he was known as the Odd Father. So when you're preparing for a role like that of a real person now, how much research are you doing in that to prepare for the performance? And is your goal to impersonate the individual, or are you just drawing an essence of the individual when you're doing the part?
That's a great question. That's a great question. One, I did a lot of research on him, so I read about him, read several books about him. I remember him growing up, and also, did the research on the book. The book, it's a real story. Blackbird is based on a book called In with the Devil. So actual events, and which are always amazing when you think of who meets up in prison. I have a great story about Blow, a movie I did about that's just, you couldn't make it up. So I absolutely did the research, but the thing that I had come to grips with, because the odd father, the fact that he was feigning madness all these years, and they finally caught him because he was he'd wander around Greenwich Village in shabby, unshaven, in a dressing gown, a bathrobe, and he'd pee in the streets, and just all knowing he was being watched all this time.
Yeah,
and then he'd stop and talk to doors, and he evaded. I forget how many years. It was like 15 years he evaded prison. They just couldn't. And then they finally put a case against him because guess what? Someone figured out that there was a car that used to leave around the vicinity once a week or twice a week at the same time. And of course, what it was him going to see his mistress. And of course, when he was seeing his mistress, he was completely
right.
So, but I couldn't really impersonate him directly. So it was more of an essence. And also I had to accept the fact that ruse was over. He was no longer crazy. They finally, he was out, so he was who he was at that point, trying to survive in that area and still trying to run the situation in New York. But it was a pleasure to play him. It was really, really, and I don't say this because I'm in it. I think it's a great, great miniseries, but it is heavy. It is dark.
Yeah.
And the acting, Ray Liotta and Taron Egerton and Paul Walter Hauser, my God, these guys, and I forget the woman who played the FBI agent, Greg Kinnear. I mean, it is truly a wonderful series. Limited, 6 episodes.
It was actually tremendous. Like I said, the acting was amazing, and I mean, just the first scene of yours in the prison yard when Taron's character first approaches you, there's such menace there, and there's danger, but at the same time, he's also, I guess, almost affable. I mean, he's approachable. That's an odd balance to try to pull off, where you have to say, like in the same moment, you're thinking he can either kill this man right here, or they're gonna hang out and be friends. How do you balance that, walk that line?
I don't know. I mean, it's in the writing. Because if you remember, the character all of a sudden speaks to me, starts joking with me, kidding with me, which on one hand could be a lot of trouble, but there's something about this kid. There is something about this kid, and I think it's paternal. He'd love to have someone under his wing. He'd love to have, a sense of being a mentor to I think they're human needs. Is so much of that is based on family and those types of relationships. So to be in prison with bodyguards and protection is not the same as being surrounded by your family. But I think, initially he recognized something in this kid, and then he finds out, as you recall, oh, he's half Italian. Yeah, that must be the good side, So no, there's great humor. And Dennis Lehane, the screenwriter, who's also, one incredible novelist, Mystic River, and others, was so great. He said an interesting thing in the audition that, something to the effect of when he's being the nicest, he can be the most dangerous.
That's interesting.
Because exactly what you said, it could go either way. Is he being nice to ingratiate you so he gets you close so he can do something to you? Or is it actual generosity and stuff? No, it's he should be confusing, and it's sort of, in many ways, the jeopardy that exists in the film, in the miniseries rather, because I think something, when all of a sudden it turns, I think this kid is something else, and it really disappoints me. It becomes even more personal because I've opened myself a little bit to him.
Yeah.
So if and when there's a betrayal, it becomes, it's great writing. It's just great writing. That's all I can say. It was shot in New Orleans right after that hurricane last fall. We got there. Matter of fact, it was a month after, and the streetlights were still not working. I'm talking about the French Quarter. I'm talking about in the center of New Orleans.
Yeah.
And there was debris, but I had the restaurants all to myself. I must say, there weren't that many tourists there. I had shot there a couple of other times, and it was wonderful.
So, as you mentioned, the cast too is amazing, and Taron Egerton is so strong in the show as well. I mean,
yeah.
And the chemistry between you two is dynamic and it's interesting. Once again, how did you pull that off? How did you guys draw the best performances from each other and develop a sense that very quickly you just knew each other?
Yeah. I had great respect for him going in because I had seen the Elton John movie, which told me a number of things. He was a great actor, but not only is he good, great, solid actor, he's a triple threat. This guy is something special. Of course, he's Welsh,
Yeah.
So, his dialect, off screen is something. So you try to talk and get comfortable with each other, which we did. But there's no, you're blessed when you get to work with a good actor, right? Makes it easy, just like Chris Judge, Taron, other people. But the job of an actor, I used to have a teacher who says, the actor has to have the ability to play the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet with a chair. What do I mean by that? He has to endow that chair with all the love and passion that Romeo has for Juliet. He has to touch that chair, or he has to imagine to touch that chair as if he would touch Juliet. As part of the job, when you work with good people and good writers and a good director, you don't need to go into that toolbox. It's there. It's funny, I used to have a teacher that used to say exactly that. We're going to give you an artisan's toolbox to take with you when you go to work. If you walk in to a house and you're an artisan and things aren't broken, the drains aren't clogged, the house doesn't need painting, tell them that. Don't go out and paint the house and try to fix a drain. So it's, and I've always appreciated that. I've always been uncomfortable with the notion of the artist, simply because, I mean, my belief is that there is an art of acting without question, but the art happens when there's the right bond and the right event between the audience, the public, and the actor and the other actors. Then on a given night, I'm talking more of the theater, on a given night, art can happen. Now, below that is great entertainment in the theater, great joy, great comedy, great. But when you talk about art, it's a very special thing that one attempts every night to get to it but frankly, one does not attain it every night. It just doesn't, but you still give a very, very engaging performance or something. And often the actor is the hardest on themselves about that.
Well, as we mentioned, Blackbird, which is on Apple Plus for anyone who wants to check out and is worth checking out. You're also in another short film, which is absolutely fascinating, where you play Shakespeare in, called Rough Magic Exit Shakespeare. Now, the interesting about this is now you're playing a very, very iconic individual. I mean, potentially the most famous literary figure, author in history. Now, when you're playing a performance like that, and a guy like Shakespeare, there's a lot of expectations on how people envision Shakespeare should be to them. So when you're doing Shakespeare, are you thinking about how Shakespeare is to you, how Shakespeare would be to the people watching it, or how the writer might envision what Shakespeare would be like?
Part of Shakespeare's greatness is that he speaks to everyone. Everyone has a personal connection to him if you truly read his work. Be you on the left of the political scale, on the right of the political scale, whatever your sexual orientation is, whatever, there's something for everyone. I was fortunate enough to do a lot. It was the very first thing I ever did. I always ironically joke that the first lines I ever said on any stage were, "All is lost, to prayers, all is lost." It was a mariner in the tempest. And I always think of those words, even 40 years into my career, well, almost 50 into my career, I think, because that's what an actor's life is like. You're right. I fairly familiar. I wouldn't call myself a Shakespearean scholar, but I've done probably 25 of his plays, maybe, a fair amount. I learned how to act through Shakespeare. There's Shakespearean acting, and then there's learning to act through Shakespeare, meaning it's the whole package. You have all the emotions, all of the given things an actor, plus the language. And that's the black belt, to do it all, to keep all those balls in the air. So I really, really enjoyed it. Rough Magic sort of came about because a director friend of mine, along with a friend of his, Andy Wolk and Elliot, Elliot had an idea. They were old friends, about Shakespeare wandering out of a tavern. And that's all he got, and hallucinating, so drunk that he's seeing his lines in front of him. And when COVID hit, Andy and I had been working together. We did I've done several films and television things with him, but we wanted to work. It was COVID, but we needed to work. So I call this art in the time of COVID. So it started out as this Shakespeare late in his life, having troubles. Shakespeare was a shareholder in his company. So the actors were empowered, the major actors. They were like the producers and the actors. And he's written all his great stuff, quite successful, but now he's struggling. You probably know from this. He's struggling with the romances. The romances weren't as well received because guess what? It's like you were saying earlier, the audience expects something from you. And all of a sudden he changed it all. You know, he went from Hamlet and Lear, Macbeth, and all of a sudden you have Cymbeline. The audience is like, what the hell? So box office is not doing well. So what do people do when box office is not doing well? All his fellow shareholders are saying, go back, do what you did. Why are you writing this nonsense? Give us tragedy, give us this, give us that. And of course, he is an artist. He's trying to create a new thing. So over the course of this movie, we follow him wandering around London. And through the course of this movie, he finds the inspiration for The Tempest.
Very cool.
Which is his last real masterpiece, shall we say. He did right after that. Something that also plays a huge part in this movie is that, you know, Shakespeare lost his son to the plague.
Yeah.
And just like in Hamlet, the novel that came out not that long ago, our actual work preceded this. He's haunted by the fact that he wasn't there. Because we know Shakespeare lived his life in London, but his family was in Stratford, which was probably a 2 to 3 day trip. And it's the guilt of that, of not being there, about sort of failing his family. And now he's blocked as a writer. Can he go home? Can he go home? Will they accept him? He has a granddaughter he's never seen, he claims, you know, in the thing. So it's about the obsession of a theater artist and the split that exists with family, how families suffer because of our obsessions. Luckily, my wife is an actress, so she knows. But so I do encourage it, and I do encourage you to see it. Hopefully, I don't know where. I know it's played in Wisconsin. We had screenings in LA, and it's going to the Ojai Film Festival in November. Should any of the listeners be in Ojai, which is a beautiful town north of Los Angeles. A nice festival, by the way, a respected film festival. So there it is. But it's a lot of baggage to play Shakespeare, but ultimately Shakespeare is everybody. There's something. So I just got rid of the notion of what it should be, and I let the words affect me. And it was, you know, listen, anyone can play Shakespeare. If you disagree with my version, you're more than welcome to go out and do yours. You know?
Well, I think one cool thing about I was reading a little bit about the play. There's a question to Shakespeare to himself is, has any of it been worth it? So, which is a very profound question. I think it's a question that we all ask ourselves in anything that we do. Has it been worth it? Especially when we reflect on our lives, and as long as we've had enough of life to reflect upon. So, in your opinion, how does Shakespeare define worth? Is it worth far as finance? Is it worth personal, or is it worth legacy?
Yeah, that's another great question. The thing we have to realize that Shakespeare, it was popular entertainment. He wasn't the bard of Avon. That happened in the 17th and 18th century, that he was idealized. At this point, he doesn't know. You know, as a matter of fact, in this film, he says, you know, what does it matter? Who will remember me? Who will remember Shakespeare? I mean, you know, so, and actually he was very well known, oddly, equally famous for his poetry, you know, is sort of fascinating. But this idea of worth, the other thing that comes to mind is the ability of art to change life. It reflects life. I don't know if there's a British playwright, very dark British playwright, but quite a good one, named Edward Bond. He wrote that play Saved in the early 60s about the violence of youth in England. You may have heard about it because they stoned a baby in a pram. These young kids not having anything to do with that. So it was quite shocking at the time. But he wrote another play called Bingo about Shakespeare. And in this play, it's Shakespeare doing the same thing. What am I doing? What am I, you know, they tell me I'm a great artist. They tell me so, but when I walk to my theater, I still see heads on spikes. I still hear bears being baited in the pit next door. It was a big thing for Shakespeare to get Blackfriars. I mean, yes, to get Blackfriars, because that was on the other side of the Thames. It was on the respectable side of the Thames. He got that late in his life. And it was an indoor, or at least a covered space that you can perform at night as well. Anyway, so this question of worth, and isn't that something we all ask ourselves?
Yep.
I hate to warn you, but the asking gets more. I hate to alarm you. The asking gets more intense as you get older. What do I have? I have 15, 20 years if I'm lucky.
Yeah.
How do I want to spend that? And Shakespeare's faced the same thing. Do I really want to write 3 more plays, or should I go home and get to know my wife again, and my daughter, and my granddaughter? What's also interesting, because you obviously Shakespeare, is that in the romances, it's always a relationship. Well, 3 or 4. It's always a relationship with a daughter, a separated daughter, or a very tight relationship. Shakespeare had 2 daughters. One he was very good with, Susanna. His other daughter, Judith. It was really problematic with her.
Oh, yeah?
Really problematic. And so consequently, these romances were a way of imagining, because as you know, they're about forgiveness and unification of family and coming together. And that was fascinating to me. He's endlessly fascinating. And I feel he shaped me as an actor. You want to talk about Braytak and all the sci-fi, you'll notice a lot of those actors have done a lot of theater and a lot of Shakespeare. Patrick Stewart. Even, dare I say it, I read this great book about Christopher Plummer. He was Canadian, but he worked as an American, for many, many years. One of the great actors. When he did his Hal, I think it was Henry V or Henry IV, Part 1. I forget one. He writes in his book that he got kidney stones and he had to miss a performance, and it killed him because there was this hungry understudy who he knew was going to go on, and he knew was going to be good, at Stratford, Ontario, which is a great premier festival in America. You know who that guy was? William Shatner.
Oh, shit.
It's the truth. It's the truth. So even Bill Shatner, who is, we'll talk about first person acting.
Yeah.
Shatner, but what a life in his 90s working. And so anyway, Shakespeare's been a great gift to me. And if in any way I can repay it back by doing this, it's 37 minutes, but it's a journey in 37 minutes. It's quite, and it's one person, by the way. It's just me.
Very cool.
There are no other actors in it.
Well, like I said, it's called Rough Magic Shakespeare, and if you can, any information where the rest of us can catch the film, I would greatly appreciate it, because it sounds awesome.
Yeah, I will do that. And it's soon. What I'll do is, if when I have a list of more of the places it's showing, or if there's any way of seeing it, streaming, etc., I'll send you an email, and then you can announce it, and you'd be doing me a favor. So
it would be my honor, sir. Like I said, I definitely want to watch it. As like I said, English teacher, Shakespeare is a very big part of what I teach. So thank you so much, sir. It's a total honor to talk with you. And anytime you want to talk about anything, come right back on the show. The door's always yours. You
got it. Maybe in a couple of years we'll redo it. Hopefully it'll be.
That'd be absolutely fantastic.
You be well. Bye-bye. You too.